Nothing to be.
We are rolling. So, you said that you had a tale about a case specifically that you were involved with?
Yeah, and this is kind of how my involvement with the Don Bailey disciplinary stuff comes into play. As we go through this, you're going to hear from Thom Lewis, and it was his case. He owns a collie rescue. He did. Talked about the beginning of his case, and we're going to talk more about that. Thom was a client of Don Bailey's, and as I covered before, I work in the same office of Don, but we didn't share clients and cases unless we were specifically working on a case together. I didn't know anything about the cases he was working on. Thom was one of those cases. I didn't know anything about Thom's case. Well, Thom has a saga again that is at the very heart of everything that we're dealing with today. His case, and you'll hear from him. And his case was dismissed by Judge Jones in around August of 2008 or so. It was a full, then they went through an appeals process and they had other stuff, and I had no clue what his case was about and what they were doing. One day I was sitting here though, and Thom called the office. I don't know if Don was here and not busy or something, but Thom was, he's a friend and works here, and I knew him from, being Don's client. And he told me about this case where he's got this fellow who is a homeless man, and he had a dog taken by the Humane Society, taken from his car when he was in a restaurant having lunch or something. And it was clearly unjustified. It was clearly wrong. There was, something clearly wrong about it. And Thom called in and asked for some help. And I said, sure, I'll help. So I got on the phone and called the Humane Society. I said, hey, it looks like you guys made a mistake here, et cetera, et cetera. Me not knowing anything about Thom Lewis and his involvement in the whole dog business and all these dog traffickers. Weird how these people surface in these disciplinary proceedings. There's a Patty Bednarik with the Office of Disciplinary Counsel. I'll save that to get into it with Thom. I'll try to stay focused on the Miles Thomas case. So in any event, I take this case, and for some reason they don't just return the dog. I mean, honestly, I picked up the phone and I made a phone call thinking, oh good, we'll get this squared away. It won't be a problem. Somebody made a mistake, blah, blah, blah. And I get some resistance from the executive director of the Humane Society. I forget her name now. And it was the kind of resistance that you learn to pick up cues from people. And I thought there's something going on here. It was more than just we had justification. I mean, I just sensed that she was protecting something there. And so I write a letter. They don't respond to the letter. They start making up this course of lies, and it turns into this thing where I, say, look, I mean, unless you guys return the dog, this poor guy wants this damn dog back. Just give the dog back. So I ended up filing a federal civil rights lawsuit over it, and I filed a motion for an injunction. I filed a federal claim saying they took this man's property without due process of law, and they won't return it to him and give it back. And to me, no brainer. I mean, it was just absurd that we had to get to that point to begin with. But no, we had to go invoke the massive power of the federal courts to come in and intervene. And again, I don't know, everything that's going on in the Thom Lewis case, and I'm just kind of dumbfounded by this whole thing. Well, it starts becoming like this local media thing. This a reporter for the Patriot News heard about it somehow or other and got on it, and he was out here, it seemed like every couple of days, doing a little follow-up story on it, somebody this, somebody that. And some other local television coverage, I forget what station that was, started getting interested in this. Well, an interesting little sideline here that does become relevant later on is there's a local ABC 27 affiliate, and their main anchor, a woman by the name of Alicia Richards, happens to be a big benefactor of this Humane Society. And you always, I notice, I watch it, it's my local news channel of choice, and you always notice that there's a lot of promos for the Humane Society and things of that nature on. And oddly, getting all this local media attention, but they're not covering it all, and they want nothing to do with it. Well, word comes out that she threatened to quit if they covered this case about the Humane Society not giving a dog back. And again, this is 2009, and I had been through a lot in my practice and have tried numerous cases under many circumstances, but I was still kind of naive to all this stuff that was going on. Because I never really took much time to think about it. I had cases, I went from case to case and represented clients, etc. And all the while going on behind the scenes here is, and I have to fill this in at some point, I have this disciplinary thing going on with me. Now recall, my state of mind in regard to my discipline is, I screwed up. I let some personal problems interfere with my practice. So I wasn't fighting it. I wasn't paying a lot of attention to it. I was just agreeing to what they said and trying to work out some discipline and move on. I'll come back to that down the road. Now back to the Thom Lewis and Miles Thomas case. Miles Thomas has died, and he was 77 years old or so, and just this little old man who was, an old Republican operative that we became pretty close over this whole thing. He trusted me a lot, and I know he relied on me a lot, and I became fond of him as well. But in any event, back to it. So, I have to file a federal case. We file an injunction in federal court, and the judge drags us in for, first of all, I couldn't figure out why a judge just didn't pick up the phone and say, what the hell is this case doing on my docket? Give him the man his dog back and get this thing out of here. That was the only way that this case ever should have been resolved, is for somebody to say, give the guy his dog back and stop playing these games. But they didn't. Judge Jones schedules an injunction hearing. There's a courtroom full of people about returning the dog back, and other parties are there, and there's, some cameras out front, and honestly, I'm walking in there, most attorneys, you think that these attorneys, they get themselves on TV and their picture in the paper, whatnot, that they're impressed with themselves. I was humiliated. I was absolutely humiliated every time I got a phone call about this case, trying to justify to myself using a federal court because these people wouldn't give a dog back. And even the judge, one time he says to me in chambers, he's private, he says, hey Andy, you're getting yourself a little publicity out of this, kind of like, thanks for going along with what I'm doing. And I look at him like, what are you talking about? But at his all the behind closed door stuff is what became bizarre. We go out in the courtroom and to have these proceedings, and the judge makes this big thing about it, and then says, "Okay, counsel, come back in my chambers and let's talk about this thing." And I'm thinking, it's about time, man. I've been trying to talk about this for weeks. We get back there, and the attorneys and me and the judge are all sitting at the table, and it's like this whole formal thing, and the other attorneys say, "We'll give him his dog back. We just don't want Thom Lewis involved." And I look at them and think, because honestly, I did not know. You'll see, you don't know now, but you'll see as this fills in how big Thom Lewis's case was to all this. I think in retrospect that they all thought that Don Bailey and I were working as some kind of part of some kind of joint plan to go after these dog people or something, when I didn't know anything about all these dog people. I knew a Humane Society took a man's dog, and I had to file a stupid federal case to get it back. So we're going through this, and the judge starts buying into this stuff about Thom Lewis being involved. And I didn't even know at this point, I didn't even know, so I might have known that Judge Jones had, one of Tom's cases, but I didn't know anything about it. So when Jones was talking about them not wanting Thom Lewis involved, I wasn't really reading anything into that, except I just kept, because at times during these conversations, Miles wasn't back there with me. It was just me alone. Miles should have been back there, could have been back there. But the other attorneys get up and they leave, and me and the judge are sitting there. And the judge is like super friendly with me because I'm always nice to people and I'm respectful of people, and his staff like me and I was okay with them. And hey Andy, this, that, and the other thing, and Thom Lewis being involved, and I just like, Judge, what is the resistance here? I can't, and they wouldn't tell me. I mean, they were like presuming that I knew, but they wouldn't tell me anything. So in any event, we go out of court that day with no deal, and I go make some stupid comments like, we go back in the courtroom, and this needs to be said. We go back in the courtroom that day, and we weren't able to resolve it. We weren't able to resolve that silly issue of returning the man's dog. And the judge made this a courtroom full of people out there, and the judge makes these comments, trying to dignify this stuff by saying, "Oh, we're working so hard and we're going to get this thing wrong." And before that judge, the last words he said before he walked off the bench that day, "We're going to do what's in the best interest of Barron." Barron is the dog. We are going to, this is a federal, you know, it's going to be hard to bite my lip and not curse when I say this is a federal judge getting on a federal bench with my homeless man who has had his dog taken by these people, and the judge gets up there and says, we're going to do what's right by the dog. I wanted to jump out of my chair and chase him down and say, you mother effer. You know, I got a man sitting here next to me who has been abused by these people and is being abused by this system and is being abused by you, and you're talking about doing what's right by a stinking dog. I mean, you know, that to me, I want to sit down and I want to tell the judge in person how offended I was by that. That was one of the most offensive things I've ever seen. And you know, he thought, oh, he struts off the bench like he's some smart guy, and he just did the right thing there. And I'm just sitting there, you know, with my heart sunk in my stomach, thinking that was offensive. So this continues to go on, and Thom Lewis continues to be an issue, and they won't give the dog back, and they schedule another hearing. And we go through this whole thing again, and at this point, I'm just like, I don't even know what to do with it. You know, they won't tell me why Thom. And then we started piecing things together a little bit, and I'll tell you what the connection here is. This is what we pieced through the Miles Thomas case that we weren't aware of, or that Thom and Don weren't aware of during his cases. Okay, Thom Lewis sued some people that he was, Thom was a collie rescue. He saved dogs. And he was in business with some people that sold dogs, saved dogs. You know, they were animal welfare people. And as it turns out, some of these people, you know, they ran basically a cult. They're up in Mifflin County or something. And it's, you know, the kind of fraternity of light that comes to mind is what they did. Yeah, Dan Flaherty, Tom Sterner, they were the two main defendants in the case, and you're not going to understand this factually. So just let me say, because this will come in and make sense later. They run this cult up in Mifflin County, and it's, you know, they require people to get married to each other, and everybody becomes a son and a brother and sister, and they go swimming naked and wait for spaceships to come, and you know, there's even some suggestions of illicit sexual activity with minors and things of that nature. I mean, some really, really bad stuff. But they're the defendants in the case, in Tom's case. And one of the defendants, Dan Flaherty, he was an administrative law judge for the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board. Okay? Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board, Federal Judge John E. Jones is the former chairman of the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board. So basically, Jones was the chairman of the Liquor Control Board at the time when this Flaherty, who's in this cult, was an administrative judge for the Liquor Control Board. But then when Jones becomes a federal judge, the case where Thom sues Flaherty goes to Jones. And none of these connections were known during Tom's case. And this is the stuff that started because Thom didn't know until he started becoming an issue in the Miles case. And I kept talking to him, Thom, what the heck is going on? What's going on in your case that you're such a huge issue? And I started to learn a little bit more, and I started to see some of these things. Well, those are the kind of connections that were made there through Tom's case. And then it started to kind of conjoin with my my disciplinary proceedings, because then this Miles Thomas thing